After we chased him out, nobody wanted to say anything. All of the suspicious ones had been driven away. Even though we knew there might be some innocents among them, we still did it. We chased him out of his paradise, where people didn't have to suspect each other. But our motive for chasing them out was suspicion of one person towards another, the worst kind of crime for a human. If we had accepted the existence of a 19th person, of a witch, then we might have been able still be talking face to face, trusting each other. In that instant, we would agree to chase out all of the suspicious people, but had it been the right thing to do? During this endless silence, we could do nothing but quietly be tormented by that sin. Naturally, we faced the door without letting go of her rifle for even an instant, sitting far back in the sofa. She would probably spend the night staring at the door without wink of sleep. George gazed through a gap in the curtains by the window, looking down at the courtyard of the mansion that surrounded it. I didn't know whether he was checking to see if a suspicious shadow would become visible through the window, whether or not he was wondering to himself about something. Jessica was sitting sideways on the sofa next to Aunt Natsui with a dead expression on her face, and every once in a while, as she thought she'd remembered something, she'd take out the inhaler she'd used during the asthma attack and stick it in her mouth. I just heard it from Anarchy. But apparently Jessica liked Canon. It was apparently so vague that she hadn't realized it herself. You know, the kind of thing that people tend to spot before the person in question realizes it. Which means she might have first learned her feelings when the person she liked died. It must have been so terrible, so sad. Come to think of it, Canon was one who handed her the inhaler. Maybe she was remembering that. I was fishing around at Grandfather's study, thinking I'd research the meaning of the magic circle on the letter's second sheet. Even though we were shut up here in a defensive position, my rebellious nature made me want to find some key, some way to resist. After all, we've got plenty of time before tomorrow morning. Who could fault me for how I used that time? No one else showed that much interest in this magic circle. Its meaning was unknown, and once we understood it, we were sure to find some message that could cause us unnecessary anguish. I felt the same way, however I couldn't ignore it, so I killed my time by going through the motions of researching it.
熱心だね。何か手がかりになるようなことは見つけられたかい？
さっぱりさ。そもそも日本語で書かれた本を探すことからして骨だぜ。じいさまは一体何カ国語を読めたってんだ。大したもんだぜ。
バトラ君は眠くないの？誰かが起きていてくれてるうちに休んだ方がいいよ。ナスヒおばさんは寝ず番をしてくれると言ってるけど、体が持つわけない。ローテーションで休んだ方がいいよ。
じゃあ兄貴が先に休めよ。俺は眠気が来るまでちょいと調べ物をしてるさ。
さっきの魔法陣？
どうせ時間は腐るほどあるさ。ベアトリーチェ様がどういうメッセージを込めやがったのか面白そうだと思ってよ。よ
せよ。そういうのやってると妙なのに取りつかれちまうぜ。
安心しろよ。俺はマリアにお墨付きをもらってるぜ。俺には霊的才能は活気しなんだとよ。
マリアのこと邪険にしすぎたかな。
ジェシカ、今はそれを考えてはなりません。
でも母さん、もしもマリアが無関係で犯人が他にいたなら、犯人は襲いやすい相手を狙うに決まってる。それで殺されたなら私たちは見殺しにしたことになるよ。
A gloomy silence settled in once again. It looked like Jessica regretted letting her emotions take hold of her and snapping at Maria. She always been like that, acting tough and then regretting it later.
気持ちはわかりますが、マリアは犯人と接触し、こともあろうか、その肩を持つように 煙に巻く発言を繰り返しています。私はこの部屋から追い出せて清々しています。
夏日おばさんって結構きついっすね。9歳の女の子のザレ言かもしれないじゃないっすか。
It probably wasn't very convincing to hear that coming from me. I thought myself Mario was creepy on several occasions, even doubting her true nature. And when Mario was chased out of the room, I couldn't deny I felt some relief.
もしそうだったなら、明日謝罪します。彼らをこの部屋から追い出したのは、すべて私の責任です。だから、あなたたちが気に病むことはないのです。
I could feel a tragic determination in Aunt Natsui's words. To protect her own daughter, she had completely chased out the suspicious ones. And if, as a result, she had to watch the people who had unfortunately been suspected die, so be it. She was prepared to take full responsibility.
なんでマリアってあんなことばかり言うんだよ。自分で自分の首を絞めてるぜ。
もともとマリアちゃんが魔女や魔法に傾倒するようになったのは、僕はローザおばさんのせいじゃないかと思ってる。
ローザおばさんのせい？何がどう関係してるってんだよ。
バトラ君だって気づいてるんじゃないかい。マリアちゃんの本当の父親は随分昔に蒸発してるんだ。おばさんはそれを海外出張とか言ってごまかしているけどね。
後宮家ではローザさんたちに関わる話はタブーとされているところがあります。
おばさんは再婚だって考えたと思うよ。でもマリアちゃんの存在が枷になって非常に難しかったんじゃないかと思うんだ。だっておばさんは時折ものすごく感情的にマリアちゃんに当たっていたから。
それについては同感だぜ。ローザおばさんはマリアを好きになろうと努力してるように見えた。ってことはつまり好きじゃないってことなんだよな。再婚の妨げになっているマリアに思うところがあったんだろうよ。
母親の感情的な拒絶がきっと彼女の幼い心に深い傷を残したと思うんだ。そしてどこかでオカルト趣味と出会い、心の隙間を埋めるように没頭していく。知ってるかい？マリアちゃんにとって魔女のイメージは決してネガティブなものじゃないんだよ。ほら、昨日海岸でマリアちゃんのノートを見せてもらわなかったかい？
ああ、なんだか楽しそうな落書きでいっぱいだったぜ。
Yesterday when we went down by the beach, doubting the witch, Maria got all riled up and started explaining about witches. And one of the pages had shown a picture of an ugly witch. They were all brightly coloured, beautiful, cute witches who looked like they were having fun. There was absolutely nothing sinister about them, like a boy might have imagined. They were beings adored with beautiful dresses, who could grant anyone's dreams of their mysterious magic and make everyone happy. The sorrow of not being loved by her mother had Maria sought help from witches as beings who could help her, give her happiness and save her. Someday a witch would come and use her wonderful magic, would bring Maria happiness. Even though she believed that, as she grew older, she had to face reality as her fleeting dreams were sliced into ribbons one by one. If something claiming to be a witch of Rokkenjima appeared in front of a girl like that, whispering that she'd take Mario to the Golden Land where Mario could be happy.
僕は今頃になって胸中を告白するよ。マリアちゃんを、いや、源氏さんたちを追い出したのは多分いけないことだったんじゃないかな。
気まずくはあるぜ。
Since Jessica had been warned to face them and slam them with words of rejection, her consciousness must have been tormenting her a lot right now.
なら、皆さんはあの手紙をどう説明するのですか？私の後ろにいた4人以外の誰にも置くことはできなかった。それは私がこの目ではっきり確認しています。あの4人が潔白だというなら、どうやって この密室の8人もの人間がいる中で手紙を置けたというのですか？
そうなんだよ。その話が始まっちまうと、確かに4人は怪しいってことになっちまう。だが、全然ダメなんだ。ああ、全然ダメだぜ。
ダメって何がだい？
ああ、もう今さら何の役にも立たないかもしれねえが、つまり、あの4人が本当に犯人だってんならよ、おかしいんだよ。
そうだぜ。あんなテーブルの上に堂々と置いたら、この中に犯人がいますよと告白するようなもんじゃねえか。そうだよ。おかしい。やるなら、例えば扉の隙間に置いて廊下側から差し込まれたように見せかけるとか。そうだよ。部屋の外に犯人がいるように見せかけなきゃ自分が疑われてしまうことが分かってたはず。
ああ、そういうことなんだ。あの4人の中に犯人がいたとして、テーブルのど真ん中に手紙をポンと置くことはリスクばかりで何の意味もないんだ。だが、どうやってそこに手紙を置いたかのトリックは置いといて、あの4人以外の誰か、すなわちこの部屋の外に犯人がいたと仮定したとき、あの手紙には大きな意味が生まれる。
よしなさい、バトラ君。今さら些細な問題です。
Natsui quickly guessed what I was getting at. No, maybe she had thought of it long before I had, and simply held her tongue.
この部屋の外に犯人がいて、俺たちが外からは手出しをできない密室に立てこもっちまったらお手上げだ。ああ、そうだよ。この部屋からじいさまがいなくなったって話の時、俺が披露した説じゃねえか。じいさまが自分から出ていくという説。自分から出ていくような何かの細工を犯人がして、まんまと外へおびき出していたのだとしたら。
Come to think of it, when we found the scorpion magic circle on the doorknob, Roselli, Maria said it herself. Beatrice couldn't get through this door, but she could induce someone to leave of their own accord.
だとすると、私たちは犯人の罠に見事ハマって、新しい生贄候補を送り出しちまったことになるぜ。
源氏たちもバカではありません。身を守ろうと思うなら、この部屋の次に安全な場所をすぐに思いつくでしょう。そこできっと身を潜めています。
Aunt Natsui hadn't answered the question. Aunt Natsui herself had realized that if the culprit wasn't in our group back then, the letter would make sense of the trap. However, it wasn't worth the risk of calling the people back she had once thrown out. To Aunt Natsui, right now, the greatest and only duty was to protect the children. By her thinking, in order to do that, a few sacrifices were unavoidable.
なあ、夏日おばさん、きついこと聞くぜ。もしあの時、たまたまジェシカもおばさんの後ろにいたなら、おばさんはこの部屋からジェシカも追い出してたかい？確かに残酷なところはあったかもしれない。でも、夏日おばさんは母として娘を守りきろうと思った。その責務から自分がやがては糾弾されることを覚悟で彼らを追放したんだ。俺は別にそれを責めてえわけじゃねえ。ただジェシカはいいお袋を持ったなってそう思ったのさ。
そうだね。夏日おばさんは朝からずっと続いているこんな事件の中でも冷静さを失わず、ずっとみんなを牽引してきてくれた。もしおばさんまで混乱していたら、僕たちは今頃全員犯人の手にかかっていたかもしれない。だから僕たちはおばさんに感謝しなくちゃいけないと思う。
ありがと
バトラたちの言いたいことは、マリアの母でもあってほしいって。私、マリアのことを 実の妹みたいだとずっと思って可愛がってきた。なのにいろんなことがあってちょっと混乱しちゃって、ひどいことをたくさん言って傷つけてしまった。母さん、お願いだよ。マリアもみんなも私たちの中に犯人なんていなかったんだよ。この事件の犯人は魔女のベアトリーチェでいいじゃないか。だからもう疑い合うのはやめようよ。
Natsui closed her eyes for a short while. She was coping with her throbbing headache again, or was she thinking of something?
ジェシカは主人と結婚してから12年もかけてようやく授かった大切な娘です。私はジェシカを守るためならどのような鬼にでもなります。
There was some pretty strong language at the end there. She realized very well that her words were an idealized view of what a mother should be, even though she was strongly resolved to protect her daughter even if she had become a demon. But that was her guilty conscience tormenting her. Today's been so long. So many things have happened in one day, and we've all driven into a corner so thoroughly. I wonder if we have the right to greet tomorrow the way we are now. But there it is.
見つけた。この魔法陣だ。
Inside the book I'd been flipping through, I'd found the same magic circle that had been drawn on the second sheet of the letter. George appeared as well. This magic circle's name was the Third Magic Circle of Mars. The Hebrew written on it were Psalm 77, verse 33 of the Old Testament. What God is so great as our God? Meaning the magic circle was discord. Agitate internal divisions and cause the enemy to bring out their own downfall.
おいおい、マジかよ。
Could there be a more fitting way to describe our current situation and mental state? We couldn't help but be stunned into silence.
じゃあこの手紙は罠だってのかよ。どうやってここに置いたんだよ。この部屋には私たち8人以外には誰もいなかったんだぜ。
とにかくどうやってここに置いたのか、その方法は捨ておくぜ。とにかく犯人の狙いはたった一つ。この鉄壁の書斎に疑心暗鬼を引き起こして生贄の羊を俺たちの手で外へ放り出させることだったんだ。
The culprit could still be one of the four we sent out. Because just getting 3 people out of the room is enough, I think.
だとしたら狙いは外へ出された人たちだ。
And Jessica has already suggested that they should leave the room as well.
母さん、どうしよう。あの4人が危ない。
It wasn't surprising that Aunt Natsu remained unpleasantly silent. Even if it was all a trap by the culprit, even if the 4 had been chased out of the room were in danger, it had nothing to do with the safety of the 4 people in here. And there was no way to prove the innocence of the 4 we chased out. If we were willing to let them die, then we shouldn't have leave the room no matter what. That way is the safest. At the moment, suddenly a piercing sound of a phone rang through the room. It was an antique extension phone set on the table of Grandfather's study. It had been rung hard after we started talking about the letter being a trap. It's natural we think of it as an SOS from the ones we chased out, but then Aunt Natsui spoke.
どうして電話が故障していて使えないはずなのに。
そんなことは関係ねえさ。
Genji was the one who checked them. What if he was lying?
もしマリアたちが助けを求める電話だったら。
そもそも電話の普通が犯人の工作によるものならば、この電話はおそらく。
With that one sentence, the ring of the phone, which had once sounded like a scream for help, now started to sound like a ghastly lure from an unknown person. Aunt Natsui hesitated over whether to pick it up the receiver.
トロ、 おばさん、何かの理由で電話が回復したのかも。マリアちゃんたちからの緊急の電話の可能性もある。
そうだぜ。それに万一犯人からの電話だったら上等さ。話を聞いてやろうじゃねえか。それにどうせ電話だ。受話器越しに何をほざいたって痛くも痒くもないぜ。
おばさんが取らないなら俺が取るぜ。
私が取ります。もしもし。
I stretched out my hand to take the receiver, but Aunt Natsui grabbed it before I could reach. We all held our breath, trying to figure out what the person on the other end of the phone was. But for a while, Natsui kept saying hello. A silent phone call? There's no way Mario and the others would do such a thing so creepy. Which means, could this phone call possibly really be? Natsui stopped repeating hello and strained her ears, because she thought she heard something far away from the other end of the receiver. What was that?
歌って何ですか、おばさん。
わかりません。電話の向こうでかすかに誰かが歌っているのが聞こえます。何のことやら。
ちょっと受話器を借りますぜ。もしもし。
I half forced the receiver from the stunned Aunt Natsui's hand and pressed it against my ear. At first I didn't hear anything, but because I'd been told about beforehand I noticed. It sounded far away from the receiver rather than someone speaking in a quiet voice, and it sounded like a girl singing a song. The voice did sound like Mario's, but it made the situation even more inexplicable. At that moment the one who had made the phone call hadn't been Mario. After all, Mario was singing some song far away from the receiver. In that case, one of the phone call should have been Genji Kumasawa or Dr. Nanjo. And yet, they weren't saying anything. Why? For what reason? The person who made this phone call? Who was it?
おい、もしもし、誰だ、返事をしろ。歌ってるのはマリアなのか。返事をしてくれ。
何が起こってんだよ。どういうことだ。
わからねえ。一つ言えることは、多分これは罠で、そしてマリアが危険だってことだけだ。
Aunt Natsui took the receiver again, but after yelling into it several more times, she realized it wasn't getting anywhere and hung up. After that, she dialed quickly, and then she clicked her tongue. That's right, if the phones were working, you would be able to reach the police. But judging by Aunt Natsui's reaction, the outside telephone line still didn't connect.
行こう。罠かもしれないことは分かってても、行かないわけにはいかない。
Might is a strong word. It is a trap.
ああ、まったくだぜ。ジェシカと夏井おばさんはここにいてくれ。
When George and I tried to dash out, Aunt Natsui stopped us.
お待ちなさい。あなたたちだけに行かせるわけにはいきません。私も行きます。ジェシカはここで待ちなさい。
私だけのけ者かよ。冗談じゃない。私も行くぜ。
そうだな。その方がいいかもしれねえぜ。電話が俺たちをさらに分散させる狙いがあるってんなら、留守番を残すのは適当じゃねえ。
議論する暇も惜しい。みんなで行こ
う。Aunt Natsui raised the rifle high and took the lead. I couldn't go unarmed myself. I found a three-pronged candlestick stand and readied it. Although the pins we used to fit candles were short, it was almost like a three-pronged spear. Then the four of us left the study. We left the study, which should have been the safest place inside the mansion. By doing this, we had been lured out, even though we had barricaded ourselves in a safe, closed room. Perhaps we were doing exactly the same thing Grandfather had done when he disappeared from that room.
Maria! どこにいるんだよ! 返事をしろ!
I listened closely but didn't hear anything. The mansion was vast, and since the passing typhoon was making its last stand, the sound of the rain was noisier than ever.
う。マリアちゃんは確か 客までテレビを見たいと言ってたよね。階下に降りてみよう。
そうですね。行ってみましょう。みんなは周りに用心して。
おい。
With Aunt Nancy in the center, her rifle ready to her finger on the trigger, we moved to the group who are back together, checking the surroundings in all directions. It was just as though the magic of that circle designed to spread discord had worked. We split up and furthermore dragged ourselves into dangerous territory. In other words, even now we were doing what the culprit wanted us to do. But this was a separate world where it wouldn't be odd for anything to suddenly occur. Aunt Natsui nervously pointed the barrel of the gun at every dark spot in the shadow. I felt like that motion was out of fear rather than caution, but the rifle she held in her hand should have been the trump card that the culprit feared.
僕はずっと思ってたんだ。カノン君のように胸にあのアイスピックを突き刺すことは不可能ではないと思う。でも母さんたちのように頭蓋骨を打ち抜いて眉間に突き立てるなんて簡単なことじゃないと思うんだ。
犯人はそれだけバカ力ってことか。
多分あのアイスピックを飛ばす、あるいは打ち込む射出機のような武器があるんだよ。人力だけであれだけ深々と衝突するにはあの絵は短すぎる。
いずれにせよ頭蓋骨を打ち抜くほどに強力です。カノンの傷も肺にまで届いていたそうです。もし相手の姿を見ても決して前に出ないように、私の後ろから出てはいけませんよ。
Just how sinister and frightening was the weapon that could shoot those creepy ice picks. And could I do anything to combat it with just a candlestick stand in my hand? In the first murder, the culprit probably assaulted all four of the parents as once they had discussed the inheritance problem in the dining hall. And there was four of us here now. Apparently I wasn't the only person thinking this. George, Jessica, and of course Aunt Natsui were stretching their senses to the utmost limit in the highest and worst state of tension, slowly advancing one step then another. Ah, what have we done now? Because of the seeds of doubt spread by that letter, we threw out Mario and the rest into the middle of this terrifying world. We finally reached the first floor. The parlour was just across the hall. When we listened carefully, we could hear it faintly. Mario's eerie singing voice. She wasn't singing naturally, as though she were in a good mood. She was singing mechanically, as though she was at a graduation ceremony had been ordered to. The song she sang was just a common folk song, one that everyone had probably sung in school one time or another. But why that, in the middle of the night, alone, with all her heart over and over? Why? Right after leaving study, we called out in loud voices asking where she was. But this time, no one said even a single word. We had hid our breath at the sound of her footsteps and intensely focused on our surroundings to the point of being completely high-strung. We stepped forward. The door to the parlour was closed, but we could hear Mario's singing voice through it. Aunt Natsui put her hand on the handle of the doorknob when George stopped her.
扉は僕が開ける。夏日おばさんとバトラ君は武器を構えてて。
わかりました。気をつけて。
開けると同時に攻撃してくるかもしれないぜ。ジョージ兄さん、注意して。
うん。じゃあ、行くよ。
He tried to open it, but immediately felt the hard resistance of the lock. Aunt Natsui took out the bundle of keys for the pocket and gave them to George. There were about 10 keys, none of us had a clue which was which. Because of this, George had to fumble around loudly and test several of the keys. Since we had hidden our footsteps, preparing to make a surprise attack on the room, it felt almost fatal. The whole time we could hear Mario's voice in the parlour singing the same song over and over. It was like a broken, crazy cassette tape. We'd been in that room almost constantly since morning. All the frightening things that occurred outside that room had left us with the impression that only this room was safe. That baseless impression was quickly falling apart.
開いた。
ありがとう。ジョージ君とジェシカは後ろに下がって。
おばさん、一気に飛び込んで 左右に分かれよう。扉を開けてボサッとしたら例のアイスピックがど真ん中に飛んでくるかもしれねえぜ。
承知しています。いいですか？
やっぱ嫌だって言いてえな。
I ordered myself. If they were going to be throwing ice picks, I'll whack them with this candle stand.
行きます。
Aunt Natsu and I ran the door before flying into the parlour, quickly splitting up left and right to search the parlour for someone who might be waiting for us. But what our eyes landed upon was an incredibly strange sight. The parlour was stained with blood. The place we spent an almost entire day, where we pressed in together to protect ourselves from some unknown malice, had been stained with fresh blood and become an ocean of blood. On the floor lay Genji Kumasawa and Dr. Nanjo, their entire bodies stained bright red with blood. But the only way we could identify with them was their clothes. That's because, that's right, this is how the whole tragedy started. Their faces. Just like our smashed up parents in the shed, you couldn't tell where their eyes stopped and their noses began. It was as though they'd been rudely plugged their faces into tomato pot pies, all squished. And that wasn't all. Their bodies had other wounds. It was those demon ice picks. They were in Genji's stomach, Dr. Nanjo's thigh, no, his knee. And that's right, of course, it's his knee. In the episode of 6th, Twilight was the stomach, 7th was Twilight was the knee. So, seeing one of them stuck near Kumasawa's calf, I couldn't help but mathematically laugh. That's right. On the 6th Twilight, gouge the stomach and kill. On the 7th Twilight, gouge the knee and kill. On the 8th Twilight, gouge the leg and kill. Now even the 8th Twilight is over. And the next one, the 9th Twilight, what was it again? Maria was there. She was facing the wall on the inner part of the room, standing stock still, completely alone. She faced away from this horrible scene, standing by the wall, singing her song over and over again. There was nothing else in the room, just corpses of the three who he brutally killed and the phone receiver, which was still off its hook, proving this was the right room it came from. Just then, Maria back to the scene as she kept on singing or facing the wall. We couldn't help but scream at this bizarre scene. We could only stare, shocked with our mouths hanging loosely open. Jessica called out to her, but Maria showed no reaction. Alone, she kept singing on and on. We had come here trying to save Maria from someone approaching danger, so now that we found her, we should have been running up to her, Maria, hugging her, joyous that she was still safe. And yet, none of us could do that. Everyone thought it, but they couldn't say it. After all, because that's right, even if that's crazy, no, it couldn't be.
Maria!
At some point, Natsui and I pointed our weapons at Maria's back. I yelled at Maria in a violent voice. There was no reaction. She just kept singing. With the candle still ready, I ran up to her, forcibly, violently slammed my hand on her shoulder. Then I pulled her shoulder, facing her to turn around. Maria's full body was quickly pulled down and fell, as though unhappy about having her singing interrupted. Maria looked at my face with an unusual expression. Even in this gruesome situation, she was just like normal.
Maria! これはどういうことなんだ? 誰がやった?
ベアトリーチェ。
いい加減にしろ!
I threw a candle stand we were holding against the wall, Her violence of that reckless sound must have gone straight into Mario's heart, but Mario's expression didn't change at all.
よすんだバトラ君。マリアちゃん、今度こそ君は3人を殺す犯人の顔を見たはずだよ。犯人は君に手紙を渡したというベアトリーチェなのかい？
おお、ベアトリーチェ。
ああ、ならこれで確定したぜ。19人目はいるんだよ。ベアトリーチェは実在するんだ。じゃあマリア、これくらいは教えてくれるよな。奴はこの3人をどうやって殺したんだ？何をどうやったらあんなむごい殺し方ができるんだ？
知らない。
知らねえってことはねえだろ。この部屋での出来事だぞ。歌を歌うのに夢中で気づかなかったとか言い出すんじゃねえだろうな。
落ち着いてバトラ君。マリアちゃん、僕とお話ししようね。
George, as he always did, crouched down to Mario so that their eyes met and talked to her very kindly.
マリアちゃんはどうして壁を向いてお歌を歌っていたのかな？
Beatrice told her to so she wouldn't see them die.
うん、ベアトリーチェがここでね、壁を向いてお歌をずっと歌っていなさいって言ったの。
じゃあベアトリーチェがここへやってきたんだね。その時にはまだ源氏さんたちは生きていたんだよね。
源氏さんはちゃんと鍵をかけてたよ。
確かに鍵はかかってたが、じゃあどうやってベアトリーチェは客間に入ってきたってんだよ。
Was she already inside?
おお、でもベアトリーチェは魔女だから鍵なんか関係ない。蝶々になって扉の隙間から通り抜けてきたんだよ。
はあ？冗談も休み休み言いやがる。そんなわけねえだろ。お前は何を言ってやがるんだ。
信じられないよね。だから言いたくなかった。どうせ言っても信じないもん。でもベアトリーチェは魔女なの。不思議な魔法で何でもできるの。だからベアトリーチェは鍵のかかった扉なんか全然関係ないんだよ。
それで現れたベアトリーチェは、そしてみんなはどうしたの？
ベアトリーチェは言ったよ。おじいさまの書斎は強力な力に守られていてどうしても入れない。だからあと3人の生贄はこの客間の4人の中から選ぶって。みんな嫌だって言ったよ。熊沢さんは嫌だってすごい言ってた。でもベアトリーチェは選ぶよ。そしたらね、ベアトリーチェはマリアはいいよって言ってくれたの。どうしてだと思う？バトラがマリアの安全を祈って念を込めてくれたあの火星の5の魔法陣のサソリのお守りがあったからだよ。だからその力でベアトリーチェは私にだけは何もできなかった。だから生贄はマリアじゃない3人に決まったの。そしたらね、ベアトリーチェはね、言ったの。
さあさあ、壁に向かってお歌を歌って聞かせなさい。あなたはたくさんお歌を歌うから、何が起こっても何が聞こえても聞こえないわからない。さあさあ、楽しいお歌をわらわにたくさん聞かせておくれ。
だからマリアはずっとお歌を歌ってた。
But people do really good impressions of Beatrice.
ずっと歌ってたんだよ。だから何も聞こえない、わからない。そしたらバトラたちがやってきたんだよ。
それを信じろってのか？バカにするんじゃねえぜ。
じゃあ今度は誰を疑う？マリアを疑う？マリアをこの場で殺してみる？そんなことしてもベアトリーチェはいなくならない。これで第8の番は終わったよ。ベアトリーチェは蘇る。
ふざけんな。もうそんな話は金輪際ごめんだぜ。魔女なんているもんか。 煙に巻かれてたまるか。俺は認めねえぞ。ベアトリーチェなんていいね。絶対に俺が認めねえ。だから存在なんかさせねえ。蘇りもさせねえ。伝説は永遠に伝説のままだ。この俺がそんなことを認めね
え。よせよバトラ。マリアが殺したわけでも見殺しにしたわけでもない。ベアトリーチェが来てマリアは抵抗できず従わざるを得なかっただけだぜ。
あれ、夏日おばさん、おばさんがいない。
あれ、
母さんどこ行ったの。
さっき手紙を読みながら一人で出て行ったよ。
A ladder? That makes sense. The culprit must have been so exhilarated that now they've reached the 8th twilight. They must have left a letter so that they could brag even more. We were so wrapped up in questioning Maya that we forgot to look for a letter. But even as well armed as she was, why would she leave the room by herself in this dangerous situation after reading it? Jessica tried to chase after her and tugged at the handle of the door, but it resisted strangely and wouldn't open.
母さん、何これ。開けて、開けて。
It was only natural. Natsuri had picked up the candle stand which Battle had thrown at the wall and which fallen on the floor. She then skillfully wedged it between the doorknobs on the double doors like a bolt, holding them closed. It was an intricate design of the candle stand that caused it to get caught solidly, and it did well to make a sturdy seal on the door. The tragic screams of the daughter for her mother didn't reach Natsuri's ears, or not. Natsuri's figure was alone in the entrance hall, with a place decorated with a portrait of Beatrice. Natsuri threw down Beatrice's last letter once she'd read it to the parlour, readied her rifle again, and a voice that rang clear yelled the massive space that was the entrance hall.
後宮家代表、後宮夏日です。姿を見せなさい。黄金の魔女、ベアトリーチェ。
The entrance hall was dimly lit. Other than the faint light which shone in the centre of the room, everything was bolted out by a jet-black darkness. In that darkness, butterflies glittered in gold, squirmed, twinkled, and sneered. Natsuri gave one more huge gulp and pointed the cold barrel of the gun towards the golden butterflies.
姿を現しましたね。あなたのような存在が本当に存在したのは私は未だ信じることができない。でもそれは問題ではありません。後宮家の代表であると自負する私と後宮家の当主を引き継いだと自称するあなたが本当に魔女なのかどうかは今となっては些細な問題です。さあ決着をつけましょう。後宮家を真に引き継ぐ者はどちらか。この後宮夏日か、あなたベアトリーチェか。あなたの決闘の申し出謹んでお引き受けさせていただきます。
Gold butterflies slowly formed a human shape which walked into the dim light. Natsuri readied her rifle and glared. The witch raised her golden staff overhead and laughed. Natsuri's finger slowly squeezed the trigger. Battler made an all-out dash at the door and rammed into it, crushing the candle stand and that had been barring it to make it possible for a big gap to open in the door. He kept kicking the stand through the gap and the door was finally released. At the time they heard it, certainly they heard the crisp sound of the gunfire ring out. once.
ジェシカちゃん、一人で先走っちゃいけない。
今のは銃声だぜ。夏代おばさんが撃ったんだ。
At whom? At the culprit. The noise had come from the entrance hall, and the entrance hall looked like a stage. Like the heroine of a tragedy on the ground bathed in light, arrayed in the beautiful beauty of that silence, Aunt Natsui lay face up, crumpled on the floor. Half crazed, Jessica ran up to Aunt Natsui. On Natsui's forehead, it was almost as though a sparkling shot of pigeon blood ruby had been placed there. And... right. Found shot to death in front of which portrait, how Putin devoted her to challenge a witch with nothing but a mere gun. Of course she'd end up like this. From it, one stream of blood makeup passed over by her eye and began to traverse her face. The faint smell of gunpowder smoke came from the barrel of the rifle Aunt Natsui still grasped. Huh? Then she shot herself in the forehead? Why? The culprit got their hands from the gun, shot her and put it back into her hands.
どうしておばさんは一人で抜け出して、どうして自分の額を撃ち抜いているんだよ。
マリアちゃん、夏日おばさんは手紙を読んでから部屋を出たんだよね。手紙がない。くそ、おばさんは何を読んで、どうしてここに誘い出されたんだ。
知らねえぜ、知らねえぜ。そんなことはどうでもいいぜ。なんなんだよ。どうして自殺なんだよ。私を置いてくんだよ。
Jessica clung to her mother's corpse, crying earnestly. My body was consumed with anger, and I don't know what to do. I snatched the rifle from Natsui's hand. I spun around and pointed the barrel of the gun at Doug's side as though I was pointing a light from a lighthouse trying to find the culprit. George, even in the situation, was trying to calmly figure something out, but that it might have been a fruitless effort. And only Mario was completely indifferent. So this is supposed to be some kind of predetermined fate? No, that's not it. It's all a prelude to a wonderful land. The door to the Golden Land will finally open.
第9の晩に魔女はよみがえる。誰も生き残れはしない。そして第10の晩に旅は終わり、黄金の里へ至るだろう。これで全部終わったね、ベアトリーチェ。おめでとう。おめでとう。だからマリアを導いて。あなたの話してくれた黄金鏡へ、今こそ。
There, all the dead will be revived, and even lost love will be restored. So in Mario's eyes, it's just as though all of today's tragedies didn't happen. It's as though all of the time she spent deprived of love never happened.
いい加減にしやがれ。何が楽しい、何がおめでたい。この島には18人いた。14人死んだ。残りは俺たち4人だ。俺は絶対に死なねえぞ。夜が明けるまで、いや、台風が過ぎ去って、また船着き場に海猫たちが帰ってくるまで、俺は絶対に死なねえんだよ。生き残ってやる、生き残ってやる、絶対。
よしなよ、バトラー。ベアトリーチェに銃なんて意味ないよ。それに生き残るも何ももうおしまいなんだよ。もう旅は終わったんだよ。ほら、時計を見てごらん。
Huh? The clock? Hearing those words, I looked at my wristwatch. Both needles were almost touching the top. Very soon it'll be 12 at midnight. In other words, 24. When you think about it, isn't midnight a strange time? It can be called 24, but it can also be called 0. It's the hour of the culmination of the previous day. At the same time, it's the hour 0 of the next day begins. Mario suddenly called out happily and ran towards the darkness. It's as though Beatrice was somewhere in the darkness and Mario was running up to her. Jessica hugged her mother's corpse, and George stood there confused. I looked down the barrel of the rifle, gazing into the darkness. Your face in front of Beatrice's portrait lay in that direction, and the thing Mario was running towards was the portrait's subject. You've got to be kidding me. This is just impossible. Like I'd fall for something like this. Witches don't exist, I won't accept it. Something like you shouldn't exist. Because it's not a human world. You think I could accept something that isn't human? I definitely won't accept it. When I pulled the hard on the rifle sleeve, the cartridge was ejected, fell to the floor, and a new cartridge was loaded. Then I sighted the witch down the barrel. Maria turned around, still clinging the golden witch, and she turned around.
だから意味なんてないってば。ベアトリーチェに鉛玉なんて意味ないってば。バカだね、人間は。
俺は魔女なんて認めねえぞ。貴様は誰だ。一歩でも動いてみろ。指一本でも動かしてみろ。こいつをぶち込んでやる。
As the witches laughed, even the large clock in the hall joined in their laughter. It was probably telling us that the time was midnight, as it was both a tone telling us we reached the culmination of this day, and the tone informing us that it will return to nothing. The rule that a witch would win when time ran out already had been revealed.
バトラー、ジョージ兄ちゃんにジェシカ、旅は終わって、魔女は蘇ったよ。
Just kill her again, and none shall be left alive. The witch shall praise the wise and bestow the four treasures. One shall be the gold from the golden land, one shall be resurrection of all the dead souls, one shall be resurrection of the love that was lost, one shall put the sweet witch to sleep for all time. Sleep peacefully, my beloved witch Beatrice. The storm passed, and the leaden clouds that had obscured the island for so long cleared away. From the rift between the clouds, sunbeams shone, and yesterday's storm seemed like a lie. Just as someone had wished, the seagulls returned to the harbour once again and let out their lively cries be heard. Afterwards, the police came and conducted an investigation on the scene. The corpses of the children who were thought to have survived until the very end were never found. However, body parts that were discovered in unimaginable and gruesome nature in the scene, the police were forced to conclude that the chances of survival of any of the 18, even the children, seemed hopelessly dim. Just how gruesome was the banquet of the witch, and how beautiful was the golden land. They were the only ones who got to hear that tale. No tales were told to those humans who arrived after the banquet was over. The best they could do was imagine what might have happened during those 2 days. However, the witch was fickle. She made a point of leaving behind a trail which didn't need to be heard, and it was allowed to spread. Then, many years later, a strange bottle of wine had drifted the waves to appear of a neighbouring island and was pulled about by fishermen. It said it was a thin, tightly rolled notebook fragment written upon crumbled small letters. Written there was a tale. Though this notebook fragment, people will finally learn the truth, mysterious riddle that happened on the day of October 4th, 1986. The incident was called by many names such as Rokkenjima mass murders, the 18 killings of Rokkenjima, through Detante's world to witch legend serial murders. The lovers lovers of the occult claimed it was all resulting in all ceremony reached beyond and those two mysteries established that Banshee later and Pence relied. However, it was not one of those interpretations pushed for truth. Furthermore, the notebook fragments describe the mysterious incident. It does not believe the truth of what happened there. Or perhaps even the writer doesn't know what the truth was. According to the writer, her name was Ushio Maria. Incidentally, as a result of an all-out police investigation, the part of Maria's body, a piece of her jaw, was discovered. It was one of the instances where a corpse was identified thanks to dental records. At the gruesome scene, there had been many body parts that couldn't be identified as belonging to any specific person. It was probably fair to say that the jaw was an extremely fortunate find. Because this jaw had been separated from the body, the police judged the chance of the survivor hopelessly dim, even though the other body parts were found or identified. And so we conclude the tale of the final section of the fragment that Ushio Maria had left behind. By the time you read this, I'll probably be dead, although there may or may not be a corpse. Those who read this, please find out the truth. That's my only wish. Ushio Maria. To this very day, the truth of the witch legend serial murders has never been brought to light. First game, Legend of Golden Witch, result. I'm not going to read all this, there's no way I get through all of this. Witch will pray for wise and bestow the full treasure of the Golden Land. There they will chose to revive the souls of the dead and lovers who were lost. After all, no matter how large amount of gold they've desired, it would have been out of their grasp. George chose his lost fiancé, Jessica chose the boy she liked and lost, Maria chose the lost love of her mother. Sleep peacefully, Beatrice, let nothing disturb your slumber ever again. Winner of the Golden Witch Beatrice, time ran out before the 80 people could solve the riddle of the gold. All 18 died, when the seagulls cried, none were left alive.